Senior NFL insider for ESPN, friend of the program, Michigan man, Adam Schefter.
Yay, Schefter!
Pat, as I was saying when I was so rudely interrupted 3 months ago, Aaron Rodgers is going to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
You're on top of it, Schefter. You're on top of it. Great to see you. Hope your offseason is going swimmingly. Let's talk about some of the news that has certainly happened around the NFL. Aaron Rodgers officially with the Pittsburgh Steelers. TJ Watt's contract, I guess, would be next. What are you hearing out of Pittsburgh, and what are the vibes like with the trigger man number 8 in town?
Well, I think that the Steelers feel comfortable that they'll be able to work out something eventually with TJ Watt, but this has been going on for a while. This is not something new and sudden, other than the fact that he decided to stay away from the mandatory minicamp, which is a simple statement to make. It cost players about $107,000 to make that statement, and when they put that into the collective bargaining agreement in the most recent CBA, it seemed like a lot of money, but when you're talking about upwards of $30+ million a year, $107,000 is really a small pittance for these guys at this point in time. And sometimes they feel like it's more important to make a statement to the team about how they feel than it is to show up and avoid being fined. James Cook, who's still on that rookie deal, he has to go in because he can't afford the fines and he wants that money. These guys have made money and they're going to make a lot more money. And so they can afford to stay away, whether it's J.J. Watt or Trey Hendrickson or even Terry McLaurin. They can afford that $107,000. Tougher for a guy like James Cook, but I think Pittsburgh and TJ Watt will figure out a way to get it done and then get him in the fold. And whoever would have thought that on the very first day that Aaron Rodgers would practice with the Steelers that he wouldn't even be the biggest headline. It would be the absence of the heart and soul of that team, TJ Watt.
TJ Watt, last player introduced when a defense is introduced for Pittsburgh Steelers home games, obviously a pillar. It feels like everybody thinks it's going to get figured out. TJ's holding out, though, so TJ's still, I think, saying it's going to get figured out. Okay, we shall see. I hope it is, because the Steelers having a chance to make a real run at it is seemingly reality. You mentioned Terry McLaurin. Tone's going to ask about that in a matter of moments. But I would like to talk about, you talk about people leaving minicamp and the fine and what it is. Cincinnati has an interesting situation brewing. And I know Bengals fans don't like us pointing this out, but it seems like this is a big-time Bengals move. Trey Hendrickson, obviously, situation happening. We've covered that pretty much in great detail. Who knows how that ends up playing. Shemar Stewart, though, number 17 overall pick. Whenever we heard him talk for the first time and he said, like, yeah, the numbers weren't right for me or whatever, it's like, okay, dude, you're a rookie. Shut up. Just show up. That was my first reaction. Then now we start reading and learning a little bit more. There was some clause that was wedged into this contract that the Bengals had never done before, and then it's basically going to void future years of contracts instead of just 1 year of a contract. And Shemar and his agent are like, we're not going to be the guinea pigs of this entire thing. So I'd just like to ask for a little bit more clarity from you. Is this a normal clause that other teams have? Are the Bengals the first team to do this? And why are we currently in this situation, and how does it end?
It's not a normal clause. That's why Shemar Stewart is objecting the way he is. Now, it's a little strange to me, the fact that as an unsigned rookie, first-round draft pick, that he's in the building with the team. And I know he wanted to be with his teammates, but who's not a team employee? Who's not under a contract that goes in to work and shows up there? Like, the biggest statement you could make is not being in the building. And that's why I believe this morning he was not there. He's not showing up anymore until he signs that contract. The Bengals wanted to include that clause in there that basically said that he would have to forfeit bonus money, guaranteed money, if he was not on the roster through the length of that contract. And these rookie contracts were guaranteed through the last CBA. That was one of the stipulations. Rookie salaries, first-round draft pick salaries went down, but they became guaranteed. And now the Bengals wanted to apparently insert a clause that would essentially nullify some of those guarantees if he got cut, which he didn't want to sign. I understand that. Like, he doesn't want to be the guinea pig here. He doesn't want to set precedent over some rookie. And I would imagine if he holds his ground, he'll eventually get what he wants, of course. But it creates a very difficult situation for a guy who needs the work with coaches to be developed. They need him as a player to be a major part of that defense. The defense had question marks as it is. They already don't have Trey Hendrickson in there. They certainly could use their rookie first-round draft pick, who you would think would be easy enough to sign, but alas, not so easy to sign him, not so easy to sign Trey Hendrickson. Neither player is there, and you lose some of the momentum that you built up when you got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins signed together this offseason.
It feels like, the Cincinnati Bengals are certainly taking steps forward to become a 21st century franchise, an organization. Obviously, we've talked about it. They have an indoor bubble now. They sold the rights to their stadium so they can make some money off it. It felt like Katie Blackburn was really moving the Cincinnati Bengals into a positive place as opposed to the Bungles conversation that everybody was kind of forced to have. But every once in a while, and I don't know what the gun laws are in Ohio, I think I do actually, they pull out a big one and then they just shoot themselves right in the foot. Like this feels like an unforced error almost. They just thought that they were going to sneak this by, and then now it becomes a big distraction almost. And then you got people outside looking in like, only the Bengals. And it's like, I don't think the Bengals have been operating like that for a couple years, but now with the Trey Hendrickson situation and this situation, it's hard not to just be like, why are the Bengals always the Bengals? You know what I mean, Schefter? You got to feel that way?
And, well, Trey is really frustrated and very upset and disappointed, and he just feels like this should have been done, and it should have been. Like, he has wanted this deal for 2 off seasons, and he wanted to be traded before the draft last year. They said, just come in, produce. He led the league in sacks. They didn't get the deal done at the end of the season, in the offseason. And all that's happened since then is other pass rushers have gotten paid. And if anything, it's given him more leverage, boosted his price, put Cincinnati in a more difficult spot. Shemar Stewart is a case where it should not be difficult to sign a single rookie draft pick, period. There's no excuse not to get a deal done with a rookie draft. The CBA has made it a layup. Like, we be able to do that deal in 3 minutes. And yet it's turned into an issue where we had the player at the facility questioning the organization, saying they care more about winning arguments than games. We got a guy who's never played a snap for the team, who's never been an employee for the team, questioning the front. It's not a great look. It's totally unnecessary.
Totally unnecessary. And also, after I heard Shemar Stewart speak, I was like, I'm on that guy's side.
Yeah.
It was hard not to, because he was just like calm, composed. And he mentioned this is their contract a couple times. So it's like the Bengals are saying, we know what the CBA says, but this is our team. This is our franchise. And it's like you could tell that was a sticking point. So we hope it gets settled, because Bengals fans, you guys are very passionate, very loyal. I don't think you deserve any of this, but the players don't either. And that's kind of where we're coming from. Now, let's talk about some other stories around the NFL. Ty, your co-host of the Adam Schefter podcast, would like to ask you a question.
Yeah, Shefty, what is the latest on Anthony Richardson? We're starting to hear a lot of different things come out. Albert Breer mentioned that he thinks it's more serious. We know he had to go meet Neil Elitrosh. I know you said on your podcast that, hey, it might be a little bit more serious than people know. Like, is the expectation moving forward now that Danny Dimes kind of has the fast track to be the starting quarterback here? And if Anthony Richardson is out for an extended period of time, is there a chance the Colts bring in someone else to potentially back up or compete with Daniel Jones?
Well, there's a few things going on here. First of all, I think there's a reason that Daniel Jones picked Indianapolis. And I think there's a reason that Indianapolis paid Daniel Jones more than the Pittsburgh Steelers are paying Aaron Rodgers, because they knew that at some point in time they might have to rely on Danny Dimes. Now, as for what's going on with Anthony Richardson, I think when you consider his injury history and consider the fact that this shoulder had surgery his rookie year, and now it's an issue where they're shutting him down till at least the start of training camp, I think it's problematic. Now, I've gotten a few texts from a few different people, and every time I get one, I go with that information to somebody who would have some information about the Colts quarterback, and they keep saying, no, that's not true, that's not right. But I'll just say that there's a lot of smoke flying around there about the condition of his shoulder, about screws in his shoulder, about the soreness in his shoulder, about how long it might last, about when he might throw again. And every time I go to somebody that would be in a position to know, they say, no, he's fine, he should be ready for training camp. And so I just think for right now, it's just one of those lingering questions that's out there. I have questions about whether or not he will be ready for the start of training camp. We don't know when he'll be back there. But in the interim, they've got a guy that they believe in, who, by the way, I think has a lot more respect around the league than people realize. I know the Giants wrote him off. The Vikings were interested in having him back. And I can tell you that there were a handful of teams out there in precarious, peculiar quarterback situations that if they had lost their starter or somehow things didn't work out the way they wanted, Daniel Jones was square on their radar. They were looking at that guy as a potential starter. So the Colts signed him. They're paying him more than Rodgers. Obviously, they're paying him more than Rodgers for a reason. I think they believe that they're going to have to rely on him at the very least at some point in this season, quite possibly early in the season.
Daniel Jones is the size of a barn door.
Yep.
He is gigantic. I don't think people fully recognize the size of Daniel Jones until you see him in person. I ran into him here in Indianapolis. It was my first time meeting him. And literally, I'm in my cowboy boots. So I got an extra 1.5 inches, 2 inches on me. I'm standing like 6'2", 6'3", probably, in those boots. And I'm looking up at this guy. And his shoulders gigantic. And then you think about his running ability. And it's like Shane Steichen's offense, with how big and strong Daniel Jones seemingly is, could be a great fit. With that being said, everything you just said about Anthony Richardson is a bummer. Like, legitimately a bummer. I've obviously been pretty outspoken about how this has all gone thus far, how Anthony Richardson has operated as a professional quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts in the past. But then I'm reminded how young he is and how much development was required whenever he got drafted after only playing like 5 games in college or something like that. So there's like a development thing that is needed for Anthony Richardson. But if you're not healthy and you can't take reps, you can't develop. And it seems like that has kind of been the carousel that we've been on here, because we see all these highlights, like the upside of AR. Outrageous. It is outrageous. You're talking about maybe one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, which is why I think everybody holds on hope that are Anthony Richardson fans. But man, at some point, your best ability is availability, and it hasn't really happened with Anthony Richardson since he's gotten here. Hopefully he gets healthy. If not, excited to watch Daniel Jones put on a show. They're putting highlights of DJ right now. He's spinning it. He's spinning it. We shall see. Okay, let's move to a couple other stories around the NFL. You mentioned him earlier. Go ahead, AP Tone.
Yeah, Schefter, we talked about the other guys not at minicamp. Like TJ, I feel like we know a bit about that situation. Trey, we don't know how it's going to end, but we know a lot more about the situation. Feels like things have been kind of quiet about Terry McLaurin and him not being at minicamp. Like, is the sentiment around the team and him that something is going to get done, or is this something that could turn into more where there's a chance he's not a Commander?
Look, I think that there are various vantage points in any situation like this. There's the player side, there's the team side, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And I think the team feels like it's going to get something done with Terry McLaurin. I think Terry McLaurin clearly is frustrated with where talks are at, because not only did he not show up for the mandatory minicamp, but he hasn't participated in any of the team's offseason activities. He's been a no-show for that. And here's a guy that is immensely respected, widely beloved within that organization and city. He has been the face of that franchise until Jaden Daniels came in and essentially took that crown, but elevated the play of Terry McLaurin. When you look at his numbers, they're as good as most any receiver around the league. We've seen huge deals given out this offseason. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase in Cincinnati, DK Metcalf in Pittsburgh. And so with the numbers that he's put up, with what he means to that team, that community, that city, Terry McLaurin is obviously trying to get paid now. He's scheduled to make about $19 million this year. He's headed into the last year of his contract. He wants a new deal, certainly deserving of a new deal. And I believe that the two sides will find a way to figure it out at some point in time. They're just not there right now. And it's easy to rattle the sabers and no-show on June 12th and make a lot of noise. It's a different thing when camp's beginning or we're getting close to the preseason. If this is going on August 12th, then it becomes a major concern. Until then, I think we could just sit back and I think wait for the situation eventually, somehow, to resolve itself.
We assume that the new ownership will want to get Terry McLaurin back in the building, especially with the greatness that they had last year.